But Zionism, just like racism, has to go. The Zionist state has to be replaced with a democracy. Equal rights. We have 5.5 million Palestinians, about 6.5 million Israelis. There's absolutely no reason in the world why they can't live together as equals. Now, often when Jewish people hear this, especially if they support Zionism and support the state of Israel, they go, see, you're talking about genocide. You're talking about another Holocaust. That's just an excuse. There's no reason to assume this is going to be violent. There's no reason for a transfer of power to be violent. Evil dictatorships can be, and evil regimes can be replaced by democracies without violence. It's happened before. There's no reason why it won't happen again. I just heard this thing today about the vast differences between Israelis and Palestinians, cultural differences, the cultural superiority of the Israelis. I've never heard such nonsense in my life. The two societies could not be more similar. Their languages are similar. Their religions are similar. More than half Israelis, more than half of all Israelis are descendants of people who came from the Middle East. They're descendants of Arab Jews who came from Iraq, who came from North Africa, who came from Yemen. Arab culture is part of who they are. When Baghdad was being bombed, you had old Arab Jews from Baghdad in Israel crying that their city is being bombed. There are no differences. And the likelihood of both populations seeing their common cause and seeing their common goals as outweighing any differences that might exist between them is far greater than anything else. And then young Palestinians and young Israelis can grow up and have a future and live in a real democracy and do great things, because this is a beautiful country. And it's got a lot of possibilities. So the name of the game has to be democracy and equal rights, not anything else. All right, thank you all very much.
The first one was, is the sale and purchase of land a viable function, and does it follow the rule of law? I'm assuming that means for Palestinians. And then, does Israel use the right of eminent domain, or is the land seized with no legal process? How strong is the opposition within Israel to what appears to be an impending attack on Iran by Israel? That's 3 questions, okay?
Let's do one more.
One more, okay. Is Bibi really serious about attacking Iran, or is this a sideshow in order to avoid dealing with the Palestinians?
Okay. I'm saying I'm no legal expert, so I don't really know about this eminent domain and sale of land and so on. So I'm not sure how to. I will say this, and I don't know if it answers the question or not, but in Israel, the land is all owned by the state. So in essence, there's no private property. When you buy land, you're actually leasing it from the state. So, and every 49 years, you have to lease it again for either 49 years or 99 years. That's kind of how that works. So what they try to do, like after 1948, they passed a law that meant that all of the absentee property is the property of the people who were thrown out and then left as absentees, they're absent somehow. The law passed that made it permissible for the state to take over the land. Then they passed another law that made it illegal for the Palestinian refugees to return and claim their land. So that's how that works. I don't know if that answers the question, but like I said, I'm no legal scholar. Is there opposition in Israel to an attack? You know, and is Bibi serious about the attack? The whole Iran issue, in my opinion anyway, is a smokescreen. It was designed very cleverly, and it's used very cleverly by Netanyahu and his government to shift everybody's attention from Palestine to some other fictional threat. And it's been very successful. I mean, the United Nations General Assembly, nobody talked about Palestine. You know, everything was about Iran, the threat on Iran, attack Iran, the bomb Iran, don't bomb Iran. Thousands of political prisoners in violation of international law sit in Israeli prisons. Palestinian children get less water than Israeli children. Palestinians are kicked off their homes and their land is being taken and their towns are being destroyed every single day. People are being killed, shot and killed in nonviolent protests in the West Bank every single week. How can you talk about this nonsense, though, when there's a threat of an the Iranian nuclear threat? And they managed to manipulate this. So I don't think he's serious. I think he would be politically insane to let go of this wonderful card. But as long as he can keep talking about an Iranian threat, people are not going to talk about Palestine. What's the point of attacking Iran? What will that give him? Politically, it gives him nothing. Militarily, it gives him nothing, because there is no threat. And then he's going to have a problem. This way, he's got this issue. He's had it for several years, and I don't think he'll give it up. So I don't think he's serious about it. That's not to say that there is no possibility that something might happen, but I can't imagine that he would do that. And you know, people in Israel are basically scared. I mean, what do people know? People know what they read, what they hear in the paper. Every day, the headline, somebody says something about Iran. The defense minister decided to say, just a few weeks ago, and the defense minister goes back and forth, supporting it and being against it, and supporting it and being against it. And so a few weeks ago, there was a headline saying, quoting him as saying, that the blade that rests on our necks now is even sharper and more dangerous than the threat of 1967. So my first reaction was, he should read my book. But you know, anybody that's knowledgeable knows that there was no threat in 1967, but they want to create this tension they bring back that tension of 1967 where people are actually afraid. Israelis in 1967 were scared to death. The generals didn't let on that this was going to be a very easy war. You know, people were actually afraid that there would be another Holocaust. And they're creating this fear again so that they can continue to talk about this threat. So I don't think it's a real threat, and I don't think Bibi would attack, because it's too good of a political card to give up.
More questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think a one-state solution will work, given that 60 to 70% of Israeli Jews and Israeli Arabs and Palestinians do not favor a one-state solution? How do you make this happen? That's one question, okay?
Okay.
Well, and the second one is similar, so I won't read it. Where did this land-grabbing, this is a biggie, racist Zionist philosophy come from? And where did the suicide bomber phenomenon come from? And...
Whoa, let me write this down.
And how could you live your whole life in Israel, serve in the military, and not see what you now see?
Oh, easy. Okay.
Is that three good ones?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that such a large number of Palestinians don't want this two-state solution. I talk to a lot of Palestinians, and I haven't done any statistics, but a lot of Palestinians that I talk to realize and see no problem with it. So I don't think there's going to be that big of an opposition on the Palestinian side to this at all. There will be opposition, of course, on the Israeli side, because when you're privileged, you don't want to give up your privileges. You know, we, the Israeli Jews, are privileged in this society. And the privileges that are given to us by the state are part of the attempt to set us apart from the Palestinians. So if I break the law in Hebron, and a Palestinian breaks the exact same law in the exact same spot, the laws that govern the state of Israel, which are, regular, conventional law, applies to me. Israeli military law applies to the Palestinian. If I participate, or I should say when I participate in protests in the West Bank and I get arrested, everybody knows how it's going to end. I go home at the end of the day. I might get roughed up a little bit, you know, whatever, but at the end of the day, everybody knows I go home. Because I'm an Israeli Jew. Palestinian that gets arrested will be beaten, will be tortured, and will be kept in prison as long as the local commander wants him in prison. It could be a day, it could be a week, it could be a month, it could be a year, without charges and without a trial. And then 6 months later, I get a letter from the police saying that the case was closed because of something, some technicality. So Israelis are not going to want to give up this privilege, but I think whites in South Africa didn't want to give up their privilege, and whites in America didn't want to give up their privilege either, but they're going to have to. Things like this are not done as a result of a consensus. That's why there are pressures. That's why there's BDS. That's why there's a non-violent resistance. That's why we have events like this. That's why more and more American Jews are breaking away from Zionism and coming and organizing events like this. And whether they like it or not, this is the transformation that's going to take place. People ask me, well, I'll tell you a little story. I was asked, I spoke at an 8th grade class. A friend of mine is a teacher of this really nice, special kind of a school where kids actually learn about stuff. So it's an 8th grade class, and they're learning about this issue. And they've been learning about it for a few weeks, and they wanted me to come and speak. And they took a poll among themselves asking how many of them think there will be a solution in their lifetime. A peaceful solution in their lifetime. These are 8th graders. They're 13 years old. 80% said no. So when I came to speak, I said, well, let's see if I can't change your mind. Because it's all a question of what you know. And I explained to them about the similarities about the societies and all the possibilities that exist once the state of Israel is transformed into a democracy. If I didn't think this was possible in my lifetime, I wouldn't be doing this. If I wasn't completely confident that this is actually going to happen, I wouldn't be doing this. So Israelis aren't going to like it, but they don't need to like it. You know, that's kind of the way these things are. But I think Palestinians, the impression that I have, and I'm there a lot, is that Palestinians actually do favor this. Okay, there's two questions here. One is about where did Zionist philosophy come from? Well, in the turn of the 19th century, there was, you know, this nationalism rose, and all these little groups decided that they were going to become nations. And my grandparents were part of that. They were Jews, and they were in Eastern Europe, and they suffered from pogroms, and they suffered from all kinds of discrimination and racism against Jews and anti-Semitism, and they thought, well, maybe this is a good idea. And when Zionism began, you know, there was a whole scope of Zionisms. You know, there were Zionists that believe in a democracy and that Jews and Arabs would live together. They didn't, in their wildest dreams, imagine that they would kick out people from their homes. And then there were other Zionists who later on became the mainstream Zionists, led by people like Ben Gurion, who was Israel's first prime minister, that were radical, racist, and violent. And they won the day. And they gave the tone, and that's why Zionism is what it is today. Racist, violent, militant, and non-compromising. But that tone was given by Ben Gurion and people around him. So that's where that came from. And where did suicide bombers come from? I don't know that suicide bombing is a philosophy. I mean, there are 5.5 million Palestinians who live inside of Palestine. There's probably another 5 or so that live outside of Palestine. That's 10 million people. There were less than 200 suicide bombers. So it's not like, you know, there's a rash, there's some kind of a madness of suicide bombers among Palestinians. Let's put things in perspective. And I don't know that there's a philosophy to it. I think when people are desperate enough and hopeless enough, they see their fathers being beaten and tortured, they see their sisters being shot and arrested, they see their homes being destroyed. They have no ability to go anywhere or buy food or provide water for their families or their siblings. And they see this massive army that is relentlessly oppressing them and beating them